Welcome to worship at Eliot Unitarian Chapel. I am the Reverend Barbara Gadon, and I am honored to serve as your lead minister along with the Reverend Krista Taves. If you are with us for the first time, we offer you a special welcome. We are an intentionally inclusive congregation which welcomes all creeds, all races, all genders, all sexual orientations, and all kinds of families. Welcome. And welcome to UU Summer at the Movies. This summer, we are excited to worship with 9 other congregations, each one offering a service based on the themes and lessons of some of our favorite movies. For example, what have we learned about mass incarceration since 1994 when the Shawshank Redemption was released? How do we draw hope from The Last Jedi? Where do we find freedom in Hidden Figures? We will answer these questions and more at UU Summer at the Movies. All the movies we've selected are readily available. They're either free or they are inexpensive to rent. So do peruse the list, treat yourself, and watch them before the services.
Hello, and welcome to our service. I'm the Reverend Sean Parker Dennison, and it's my privilege to be the minister at Rogue Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Ashland, Oregon. It's also my pleasure to be presenting this service with my intern minister, Allison Duren-Sutherland, for the Cooperative UU at the Movies summer program. Today we are taking a look at the movie The Shawshank Redemption, which was released in 1994, and we're going to think a little bit about what's changed since it came out and what we've learned. But right now we're going to start our service with these opening words. We join together in congregations and in communities, not only to meet our own needs for connection and care, but to be challenged to become our best selves, to awaken to the possibilities of making a difference, and to remember that in our faith, no one is to be judged only by their worst moments. We join together to become courageous enough to venture beyond the confines of our comfort and turn our fear into faithfulness. Let us, as we gather this morning, be open to the greater calling that urges us to build a better life, a better community, a better world. So much is at stake. So much must change, including us, if we are to have a better world. Let this sacred time together begin. Our Chalice Lighting words today are In Wholeness by Reverend Sean Dennison. There is no competition between this light and the darkness which holds it. Both the light and the darkness are holy. We light our chalice not to defeat the darkness, but because for a time we need the gifts of the flame, warmth and light to guide and help us in our endeavors. And when the time comes, we will embrace again the gentle dark which allows us to rest. And so we kindle this light with awareness and gratitude for light and dark and all that lies in between, each with its gifts, each with its beauty, each part of a sacred and necessary whole.
Hold me, yes, I want to break them. Isn't it time? And I want to rest till the rest of us are free. Till the last is the next in line. And I want to bring my sisters with me. Yes, I want to bring them. Time, and I won't rest till the rest of us are free. Till the last is the next in line. Let's talk of freedom. Let's talk of rights.
Our story this morning is The Secret Message, adapted from Mina Javarbin, who wrote this story based on a poem by Rumi, featuring Francis as all the parrots. Many years ago, a wealthy Persian merchant kept a parrot from India in his shop at the bazaar. The bird, who once flew free in the Indian forest, now lived in a small cage. But the parrot preferred the beauty of the forest. All day the bird sang of longing, but the merchant would not let him go because the parrot could sing and talk and his bright feathers attracted customers to the shop. The parrot had helped the merchant to become rich and famous. One day, a group of wealthy traders walked by. Their sparkling cloaks reminded the parrot of the forest stars, and he called out to them. Enchanted by the bird, the traders entered the shop. Once inside, they purchased all the merchant's goods. That night at home, the merchant announced, "I'm going to India to buy more goods for my shop." Before he left on his trip, the merchant asked the parrot if he wanted anything from the place that had been his home. An exotic flower or a silver cup, perhaps. "I don't want any gifts," said the parrot with a sigh. "But when you pass the forest and see the parrots like me flying free, tell them I live far away. I miss flying with them. I miss their sweet voices. I miss the smell of the trees." The merchant interrupted, "But parrot, you live in this wonderful cage." "You're right," said the parrot. "Tell them about this cage." "I will," said the merchant. On the way, the merchant's caravan passed through a thick tropical forest. He heard voices like its parrots. He saw beautiful birds like his flying free among the trees. "Stop the caravan," ordered the merchant. He stepped down and asked the birds to gather around. "I have a message from your friend," he said. The parrot sat on twisted banyan tree branches and listened. "Far away from India, I own a parrot that looks like you." He sent a message. He remembers flying in the forest, hearing your sweet voices and smelling the trees. He lives inside a beautiful cage that I bought for him. The birds listened carefully. Suddenly, one by one, they fell off the branches with their backs on the ground and their feet in the air. Their bodies lay still under the shadow of the banyan canopy. The shocked merchant could not believe his eyes. The parrot stayed stiff on the ground. After a while, the merchant ordered his caravan to move on. At his shop, the merchant busied himself with storing the new goods. He avoided the parrot. One quiet afternoon, the parrot asked, "Merchant, when you were in India, did you deliver my message?" "Parrot, something bad happened in the forest. I don't wish to talk about it. For years, I have sung for you in a cage. I didn't ask for jewels or spices. I only asked you to deliver a message for me. Is this how you repay me?" "Well, if you insist, I will tell you. I did indeed deliver your message to the birds. They listened, and then suddenly they all fell off the tree branches, not one breathing a single breath." The parrot listened. Then, as soon as the merchant stopped talking, he fell off his swing with his feet pointing at the sky. Not a single breath came out of him. The merchant ran to the cave. "What have I done?" he cried. "Have I caused you death?" The parrot stayed still at the bottom of the cage. The merchant knew that his parrot would never bring another customer to his shop. He took the stiff bird out of the cage and placed him on the counting table. In an instant, the parrot fluttered his wings and soared up. "You're alive," the merchant said. "More alive than ever, merchant, thanks to the message from my friends in India." Then the parrot flew away, all the way to India, to fly free among his friends. Good morning. My name is Allison Duren-Sutherland. I'm an aspirant to the Unitarian Universalist Ministry, and I've been honored to serve the Southern Oregon UU Partnership as intern minister over the past church year under the mentorship of Reverend Sean Parker Dennison. I'm so honored to be able to share with you this morning's reading. Bring Me Home by Reverend Sean Parker Dennison. When I have wandered again into the desert, the barren lands of Midian, ashamed, afraid, refusing to return, bring me home. when I have stood on holy ground, removed my shoes, but refused to hear the voice within the fire. Bring me home. When I have fled, again, still insisting that I am not enough, that my limitations are too big and my courage too small, bring me home. When I avoid the suffering of my people who are all people and spend my time tending unendangered flocks, bring me home. When I lift my voice and staff, still expecting nothing, and instead find miracles and plagues, death and life, freedom and pain, bring me home. When my people wander, 10 years for each one I ran from you, and still there is manna and water from stone, the beauty of clear commands, bring me home. When I glimpse the land of promise and know that it is real, both milk and honey, not for me to taste, but a true promise for the generations, then, dear one, then, bring me home. Caged Bird by Maya Angelou. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the currents end, and dips his wings in the orange sun's rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on a distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn-bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts of a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on a distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom.
Please take this time to center yourself for a moment, to enter into a spirit of meditation or prayer. Spirit of life, great mystery, be with us this moment. For we know that hope, while it can save us, can also be dangerous. We know that both these things are true at the same time, and therefore we know we need each other, and we need the spirit of love to engage with this dangerous hope. It takes courage, it takes creativity, and it takes compassion to unlock the bars of the prisons and the cages where people are kept. As Universalists, we know that it is not our worst moment that should define us. It is not our moments of despair that make us who we are. Our communities and our covenants exist so that we can uphold each other on the quest to this dangerous hope, this exhilarating and terrifying freedom. Our history reminds us that we are not a people of punishment, but a people of reconciliation, a people of covenant, where when our vows are broken even 1,000 times, we are still welcome to return. Together, we can free ourselves from prisons of the mind and the body and the Spirit, and enter into a community of compassion and hope, and build together a world where everyone can be free. May it be so. May we be the ones that make it so. Amen. Ashe, and blessed be. Each week we take an offering that helps our congregations do what they do, to work toward their missions, and to put our principles into action to create a better world. Many of our congregations rely on the gifts and pledges of their members for up to 80% of their budget. So, when you give generously, you are making these things happen. We know not everyone can give money, so we hope you also think about how you give your time, your skills, and all of the things that you have to give. When you give generously, we really can change the world. For these gifts, and all the gifts you bring to our communities and into the world, thank you.
Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children, keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children, keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children, keep the circle whole.
In 1994, when the film The Shawshank Redemption was released, I was a young parent of a 3-year-old. Given it was based on a short novel by Stephen King, I was wary. I don't like horror, and a short story by King that I read as a teenager still showed up in my nightmares. So I put off seeing it until a friend from the UU Fellowship told me that while it didn't ignore the cruelty in the world, it wasn't horror. It was a film about hope. I went to see it the next day and was so moved that I went back twice more before the theater moved on to its next big thing. It quickly became my answer to the question, what's your favorite film? And it stayed at the top of that list for nearly 30 years. It had made me laugh and cry, wrestle with hope and despair, and ask myself some tough questions that I now know were the kind I would come back to again and again. So when I learned that we'd be UUs at the movies for this summer worship cooperative, I immediately thought of the Shawshank Redemption. And then I tried to ignore that thought. I spent lots of time trying to think up a more recent film. I asked my worship team, and they came up with a long list of good ideas. One of those ideas was to preach about the film Just Mercy, based on the life and work of civil rights lawyer Bryan Stevenson. And that suggestion changed my mind. I decided to revisit the Shawshank Redemption and consider it through the lens of all that I've learned since 1994. The work of Bryan Stevenson, the prison abolition movement, my personal and professional understanding of racism and white supremacy culture, and so many recent events that have made all of us aware of how these systems of oppression and violence work together to feed each other fear and hatred, a world view that is diametrically opposed to the 7, soon 8 if we do the right thing, principles. So I went back and watched the Shawshank Redemption again and again, and I was amazed that it has held up well, and I'm grateful for the ways that it broke new ground when it came out. I can confidently say that it's still on my list of best films, and I'm glad to revisit it and reflect with you on redemption, freedom, and hope. You don't need to have seen the film. It's set in Shawshank Prison over a period of about 20 years, starting in 1947. It follows two main characters, Red, played by Morgan Freeman, and Andy, played by Tim Robbins. Andy is a new inmate convicted, wrongly, of the murder of his wife and her lover. Red has been there for years, guilty of a murder he committed when quite young. The film begins when Andy arrives, and Red bets the other inmates that he will be the one that breaks down the first night, as someone always does. Red loses his bet. Andy doesn't break down. He is quiet and keeps to himself, and Red, who narrates the story, says, "I could see why some of the boys took him for snobby. He had a quiet way about him, a walk and a talk that just wasn't normal around here. He strolled like a man in a park without a care or a worry in the world, like he had on an invisible coat that would shield him from this place." Yeah, I think it would be fair to say I liked Andy from the start. Eventually, Andy approaches Red, who is known in the prison for being the guy who can get things, and asks him for a small rock hammer. Red is wary, thinking Andy wants it for a weapon, but Andy convinces him it's just to continue his rock-hounding hobby. When Red asks if it could be used to break out of the prison, Andy laughs and says, "When you see it, you'll know what the joke is." Red gets him the rock hammer, which is just about the size of a man's hand, and Red laughs and says, "I imagine it would take a man 600 years to dig their way out of Shawshank with it." Andy's life in Shawshank is quite brutal. He draws the attention of one of the men who, with the power of a gang of followers, terrorizes and subjects Andy to repeated sexual and physical violence. Sometimes Andy is able to fight them off, but often he's not. And yet, Andy goes on being Andy, even asking Red to get him a poster of Rita Hayworth. And Andy and Red, they become friends. They have deep conversations, one of the deepest about hope. After Andy gets out of the hole for playing opera over the prison PA system, Red asks him why he did it. Andy says, "Music. You need it so you don't forget that there are places in the world that aren't made of stone. There's something inside that they can't get to, can't touch. It's yours." "What are you talking about?" Red asks, and Andy says, "Hope." Red laughs and answers, "Let me tell you something. Hope can be a dangerous thing." It can drive a man insane. This is the core conflict in the Shawshank Redemption. When you know you are sentenced to not one but 2 life sentences in this prison, at the mercy of a corrupt warden hiding behind Christian rhetoric, controlling everything with brutality and violence, is hope a good thing, or is it dangerous? Of course, the answer is both. And this is why the Shawshank Redemption holds up over time. It never shied away from the truth that hope is both dangerous and necessary. The film wrestles with this dilemma in many ways, and like Jacob wrestling with an angel, we're forever changed by it. Our hearts are broken, healed and broken, and healed again and again. Sometimes it seems like hope, that thing with feathers, as Emily Dickinson so famously said, has fallen to the ground, seemingly dead. And yet, The Shawshank Redemption is a film that broke ground in my life and I think in the world. It avoided so many tropes, allowing a real friendship to grow between Red and Andy, a relationship of equals in which Red isn't reduced to the magic Negro or a sidekick. Red's honest skepticism is as necessary for the story as Andy's hope. When characters suffer, when hope runs out for them, it's Red who tells us how their hearts broke. It's Red's compassion that explains how a man can lose everything to the institution, even how to be free. And when Andy does manage to dig himself to freedom with that tiny rock hammer, not in 600 years, but in just under 20, it's Red's words that help paint a picture of both the joy and the grief. When he tells us, "I have to remind myself that some birds aren't meant to be caged. Their feathers are just too bright. And when they fly away, the part of you that knows it was a sin to lock them up does rejoice. But still, the place you live in is that much more drab and empty that they're gone. I guess I just miss my friend." There's a lot to consider in the story of the Shawshank Redemption that holds up over time and circumstance. There's also a lot we've learned. Brian Stevenson and so many others have shown us again and again that what the Shawshank Redemption misses is the way the prison system is and has always been a part of the way racism and the systems of white supremacy are upheld and enforced. In reality, Andy and Red would have a hard time becoming friends across the chasm of race and its effects on their lives. And while the film reveals the brutality of prison, we know that by turning prisons into businesses that protect their profits at all costs, the conditions are even worse now. Not just violence and bad food, but leaving inmates to die in the heat or the cold, or of disease, ignoring incidents of violence and using prison labor on chain gangs and fighting fires for 10 cents an hour. The film tries mightily to humanize the men in prison, to show how the system itself is the brutalizer, and how each choice that is made is a choice in response to that brutality, an attempt to survive, to maintain something like hope. And in ever more violent and deadly systems, that is a dangerous thing. All around us, there are people trying to continue and even increase the dehumanization of incarcerated people, trading in fear and a worldview that tries to convince everyone that anyone incarcerated is unworthy of dignity, compassion, or a chance to try again. This is where our principles and theology matter most. Our tradition is deeply rooted in the deep belief that what is even more dangerous than hope is the abandonment of it. When we give up our commitment to upholding the worth and dignity of anyone, we become imprisoned ourselves, even if that cage is gilded and comfortable. The wisdom of the Shawshank Redemption is that it offers us not a choice between hope and danger, but a choice between embracing hope for us all or abandoning it. When Andy says you either get busy living or get busy dying, he is reminding us that we are not at the mercy of hopelessness. We can choose. Freedom and hope may be dangerous, but they are inside of us, untouchable, and always ours to choose. The Shawshank Redemption raises the question of who is imprisoned and who is free. What is the key to the cell of fear, and how do we forge it? What I see in the film is that compassion is connected to freedom, and mercy is more powerful than fear. Those who try to control others have neither freedom nor love, just the knowledge that the time will come when they are not the strongest anymore. Fear is the cage they have locked themselves into. What, in the end, is the redemption in the film? That good men get free, one way or another. That the corrupt do not win. That moments of joy are valuable, so valuable they can help one endure years of suffering. That friendship can overcome hopelessness. That each and every incarcerated person has a story and a lifetime and is more than their worst moment. This is a story of hope, and that is the story we want and this world needs us to share. May we choose compassionately for ourselves and for all who suffer. May it be so. May we be the ones that make it so. Amen. Ashe. And blessed be.
Nkosi, wokunge sabi, Nkosi, siyawadinga, Nkosi, wokunge sabi, Nkosi, siyawadinga, Nkosi, wokunge sabi, Nkosi, siyawadinga, Nkosi, wokunge sabi, Nkosi, siyawadinga,
Our closing words are from John Cummins. May we never rest until every child of earth in every generation is free from all prisons of the mind and of the body and of the spirit, until the earth and the hills and the seas shall dance, and the universe itself resound with the joyful cry, Behold, I am. We extinguish this chalice with gratitude for grace, mercy, and redemption, and for the dangerous hope that is the only way through on this journey to liberation and justice for all of us. Gentle people, go on your way in peace.